Hi there. Are you ready for day 4? Rules of the Ruff by Heidi Lang. Beep, beep, beep. Jessie turned over, pulling the blankets over her head. Beep, 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 beep. She pressed her ears into the pillow, chasing sleep. Beep, 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 beep. Turn that thing off. Jessie bolted upright. She blinked around the darkened room, blearily making out her cousin's annoyed face on the other side, and between them, growing increasingly angry, her small white alarm clock. Jessie turned it off. Thank you, Anne huffed. Why did you set an alarm? And so early. I have things to do, Jessie said, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. What could you possibly have to do today? Like I'm going to tell you. Jessie got up and pulled her suitcase out from under her cot, rummaging around for something to wear. Go back to sleep. Jessie, Mom's not going to like you sneaking out in the morning. Jessie found a shirt and a pair of gray sweatpants and turned to face her cousin. Are you going to tell her? Anne bit her lip. She was lying on her side, her head propped up on her hand, her blonde hair a tangle around her head. Jessie remembered all the summer nights um, in they'd spent mirroring poses like that, gossiping, telling stories, making plans. Things had started changing last summer, but they'd still had fun together until that moment, that excruciating, humiliating moment that Jessie refused to think about. This summer, though, Anne was like a stranger to her, a stranger she didn't particularly like. Anne was only 2 years older, but now it felt like an impossible gap, and Jessie could picture it growing wider and wider, as if her cot was sliding away from Anne's bed, from Anne's side of the room, from Anne's life. No, Anne said finally. Go do whatever it is, but if you get in trouble, I'm not going to back you up either. Jessie snorted. Don't worry, Anne-Marie. I remember you don't like to stick up for me. Not anymore. Anne flinched. Yes, I'm sorry about Laura Lee. I know she can seem a little, but she means well. Really. No, she doesn't. Laura Lee had spent the rest of the day at their house yesterday, and Jessie had been forced to endure the other girls' taunts. Since Aunt Beatrice had forbidden her from leaving the house again, dinner had been particularly painful. Laura Lee's the mean girl, and you're worse. You're supposed to be my cousin. I am your cousin. Anne's voice quavered. Not really, not anymore. Jessie got dressed and left the room before more words could come pouring out. They didn't make her feel any better, and she didn't want anything to ruin this morning. She ran her fingers through her messy hair, all thoughts of Anne fading as she slipped out the back door, shutting it softly behind her. Her aunt and uncle would be waking up by now, and the last thing she wanted was for one of them to stop her. It was already light out, and the sky a faded blue. Jessie shivered. She knew it would be hot and muggy in a few hours, but right now she was wishing she'd worn a sweatshirt. When she reached the hedge that lined her aunt and uncle's yard, she paused, remembering how she'd been staring at it the day she first saw Wes and his pack of dogs. It was after her first big fight with Anne, and the summer stretched ahead of her, long and boring and impossibly lonely. That day, as she sat outside listening to the whirring of bicycles and cars hurrying to better places, this hedge had seemed like an inescapable boundary. until a flurry of dog barking split the quiet of the afternoon. Jessie ran her hand over the hedge's prickly top. We're on page 14. Recalling that moment, the moment she'd finally figured out exactly what she should do this summer. It had been almost a week ago today. "Bear, you knock that off, you hear me?" a man yelled as his pack of 5 dogs pulled him around the corner, their leashes clipped on a hip pack he wore slung low on his waist. He wasn't very tall, but his arms were well-muscled, and underneath his soft stomach, Jessie could tell he used to be in pretty good shape, probably an athlete before he got old. "I said stop, Bear. That squirrel is long gone." The man tugged at one of his leashes, and Bear, a large black mutt with lopsided ears, gave one last bark and then lapsed into happy silence, his tongue lolling out of his mouth. The Australian shepherd next to Bear made a little noise. "Don't you start, Presto," the man chuckled. The man clucked his tongue, flicked the leashes like they were horses' reins, and got all dogs moving in formation. It was like magic. Jessie couldn't take her eyes off it. All those dogs walking together, looking so happy. Eve had to go see them. She leapt over the hedge and jogged toward them. "Excuse me, can I pet your dogs?" "No. Go away." His dogs shot her a curious glance, and one of them, a yellow lab wearing a pink harness, darted over to lick her hands. "Sweet Pea, you stop that." He tugged at the lab, but Sweet Pea had decided to sit, and now all the dogs moved around in a jumble, ignoring the man and his curses as he struggled to straighten them out and get them moving again. Jessie snuck a quick pat of Sweet Pea's soft head before he pulled the dog away. "This is why I don't stop to talk," he snarled at Jessie as he adjusted all the tangled leashes. "Are you a professional dog walker?" "No, these really are all mine." "Really?" He raised his eyebrows. "Sure, kid, and I have a bridge to sell you, too." "You sell bridges?" He sighed. Sweet Pea inched closer to Jessie. "Yes, I walk dogs, professionally. See this?" He jerked a thumb at his hip pack. Do you see people casually walking dogs wearing one of these beauties?" No. Well, no is right. Now, I doubt you'd go harass a fireman in the middle of hosing down a burning building, would you?" "Firefighter," Jessie said automatically. "You're supposed to use the gender-neutral term." Her father had drilled that into her head. He scowled. "Like I was saying, you'd notice his uniform and that he was busy and leave him alone. Or her." His mouth twisted. "I can see you have honed the fine skill of being annoying to an impressive level." "Thanks," Jessie beamed. He shook his head. "Come on, dogs." He was brought up short once again. His forehead wrinkled and he growled, "Sweet Pea, come." Sweet Pea must have known she was in trouble. She reluctantly stopped inching toward Jessie and allowed herself to be herded along with the others. Jessie had watched them until they disappeared around the corner. "When you're a little older, we'll get a dog," her mother had promised her. But that was before she got sick. After all her promises had scattered like dry leaves in the fall, crumbling to dust. After Jessie had been afraid to ask her dad about it in case he crumbled too. Jessie had been afraid to ask her dad about it. But seeing that strange man with his magical pack of dogs made her realize here was her chance. She might not have her own dog, but she could borrow one. She could borrow a whole pack. She decided there and then that she would become a dog walker too. She'd get that grumpy old guy to take her on as an assistant, and then she'd spend her whole summer surrounded by dogs. Okay, we're going to call it quits right there. And I'm going to put the mark in so I know exactly where we left off. And I'm sorry we didn't have one for yesterday. For those of you who will be there, I'll be at virtual lesson today, okay? Enjoy the story. I hope you're enjoying the story. I've only heard from a couple students, but it's just something different. Have a great day. Make sure you read your Achieve story today. Today is about the owls. So, have a great Thursday.